Okay, so hello everyone. This is going to be my second video, and I'm committed to producing one of these weekly. I thought on a little bit of a grander scale initially, maybe I would do one every other day, but I think weekly feels about right for me. So this will be my second recording, and just for those of you who haven't watched the first one, I would strongly recommend watching that as they sort of go sequentially and provide context for the next. So, but as a brief review, I was explaining in the first one how I was doing well in Orange County, sort of living the American dream. I was an atheist, and I was sort of living the work hard, play hard model, primarily with alcohol. And that all changed once I started working with or using marijuana. Again, refer to the first video for the story there. So, and it ended up leading me to a mushroom experience, which was an out-of-body experience, and really opened me up to spirituality, and started me on an inner journey that's now been going on for almost 20 years now. So this second video is regarding an experience I had a couple of years later. I went back and looked through all my journals, which I've got journals going all the way back to 2003, documenting my inner experience and my dreams, and a bit of just a regular diary for day-to-day stuff, but more describing my inner reality, uh, you know, and dream experiences. So one thing I realized in going through those is it was a pretty chaotic time in my life. So I don't want to overly romanticize my journey. I would not trade it. I am thankful for it, but it certainly had a lot of wild ups and downs. And, you know, the marijuana is what started me in this direction. And so, to be honest, there is some criticism in our culture that marijuana is a gateway drug. And in light of the experiences I've had, I'd have to say that is accurate. That led me to the mushrooms and led me to other, I call them sacraments, but nevertheless, drugs that have furthered me in my spiritual development. So, again, my intention here is to give an honest feedback and not just hit the high notes and leave out the low stuff. So it's a mixed bag. It's a wild ride. And so anyway, the mushroom experience broke me out of what I call the shackles of atheism, completely changed my worldview, and ultimately I would change the direction of my life 180 degrees. But at this point, after the mushroom experience, I was really just excited and exploring quite a bit. And so this next experience I'm going to describe happened about 2 years later. This was about in June of 2004. I didn't actually have a date on the journal, but the previous journal date was like May of 2004, and then there's one after it that's in July. So safe to assume this is June of 2004, just a couple of years after my out-of-body experience with the mushrooms. So, as you'll recall, I was quite a rationalist or a realist, as I thought of myself back in the day. Very practical and pragmatic and scientific, and very rational, intellectual. That was, those were the traits that I like to imagine myself as having, and felt that they were, of course, the most important traits to have. So, But after my mushroom experience, again, I was no longer atheist, since my consciousness was, 8 feet above my physical body. It became completely self-evident in the moment that my consciousness was not reliant on my physical body. It did not produce it. And so it was obvious to me immediately that my consciousness would survive my body, and so that just changed everything for me. But nevertheless, I still had that sort of scientific, skeptical, masculine sort of identity, and so I had this whole new universe to explore, and yet I didn't know where to go. Do I pick up a Bible, right? There was actually a woman that I had worked with in real estate, and she was a very spiritual woman. I remember thinking she was a nut job, really, but she would talk about reincarnation and spirit guides and all kinds of stuff. So I thought about reaching out to her, but what really attracted me was, and where I really went in from a research standpoint, just to make sense of my experience. Um, a blanket over there that doesn't look appealing, so sorry for that. Anyway, Timothy Leary came to my mind, and I remember hearing about Timothy Leary and having an idea of Timothy Leary, and remembering that he was this intelligent professor, but that he was also associated with LSD, and there was this vague awareness of that, and I had pretty much thought prior to my mushroom experience that he had sort of destroyed himself with drugs, as a lot of people would hold that position. But now, after having my experience, it's like, oh, I want to hear what he has to say, and maybe he didn't, maybe he was on to something. So I started reading books by Timothy Leary, and so that was sort of a science-based intro into these non-physical topics, sort of taking a scientific approach. So I was reading a lot of his stuff. He was referring to all kinds of people in his books, one of who was Albert Einstein and Aleister Crowley, and he was opening up all kinds of doors for me. So at the time, I was reading a lot of Leary and Einstein, and both of their messages resonated with me. And again, to be fair, at this point in time, my life is a little bit, well, more than a little bit chaotic. It is. I'm at this point, I'm using a lot of marijuana, and I'm feeling like it's my connection to the divine, and it's my birthright, and I'm going to work less and less and less, and spending more and more time, getting high and exploring these inner realms. And at this particular time, again, about 2 years after my mushroom experience, I was going through what I can honestly say, looking back now, was a manic period. I wasn't sleeping much. I had almost superhuman energy levels, not strength, but energy levels. I just had endless energy. I was just constantly doing all kinds of spontaneous yoga and working out. I was really in the best shape of my life, and it was all high and talking to myself and contemplating and working out. I almost needed to do all this physical movement to just sort of modulate the energy and sort of keep it in check. And so it was a manic period. It was bipolar. It was up and down. It was causing a lot of stress on the household. And so again, I just want to be honest. This is what was going on. At that time, I would literally smoke marijuana, and I would feel like I was on a psychedelic. I would. It wasn't your standard marijuana high. So there was something going on within me that just a little bit of marijuana would almost take me to like a psychedelic type of an experience. I look back on it now, and there's Stanislav Grof talks about spiritual emergency, and he calls it's spiritual emergence. It's basically It's almost like a spiritual puberty. It's something that is natural, but it is not recognized here in the West, and it is usually diagnosed as schizophrenic or, again, manic or bipolar. It's some sort of a problem. A lot of times these individuals can be experiencing things that are not, confirmed by the rest of people in the reality. So it's not a consensual reality. It's an inner world. I've gone down this rabbit hole. Now, the indigenous cultures, for the most part, recognized in their tribes that when this was going on, this was actually a beautiful thing. There was a recognition of this is a powerful, transformative time, and that individual would be taken from the regular duties of the tribe and perhaps go with a shaman or go isolate somewhere. They would make a special space for these individuals, recognizing they were going through a powerful internal process. I, of course, did not have the advantage of being in a culture that recognized that, and in fact, there was a lot of concern in the family and people wanting to sedate me, and again, I can understand their perspectives, but this was my newfound passion, and I was like a sponge just ready to absorb, again, some magic in the world that I hadn't experienced since I was maybe 6 or 7 years old and believed in Santa Claus. So there's a little bit of the context. Okay, so I want to keep these videos to about 20 minutes, so that sets the setting of what was going on in my life at that time. Again, there was friction with my wife, and I was using it more and more and more. Perhaps you know somebody that just smokes all day, and so from a certain perspective, that was me. And yet, from my perspective, this is absolutely what I needed to do. I experienced the reality, and I think there's a word, the numinous, that Carl Jung describes, and it's sort of this supernatural or really, really powerful inner experience that is recognized throughout our world culture, but again, not so much here in the West anymore. All right, so that's the setting. So on this particular day, I don't have an exact date. My wife's out and got the kids out, and I've got a few hours, and which I love that because it allows me to smoke and journal and write and get in contact with my higher self. At that time, I was thinking of it in terms of Carl down here and Carl up here, just like in my mushroom out-of-body experience. So this had been going on, this manic period, for a number of weeks, and this is the next story that I want to tell. So on this particular day, I smoked some marijuana. I've got the house to myself for several hours, and I smoke, and this is where it's going to sound a little bit weird, and if you haven't had the experience, then I understand that it's going to seem pretty far out there. But basically, I smoked, I exhaled, and it was as if there was another being in my aura, in my field, in my space. I know it doesn't make sense rationally. It's like, what does that mean? I recognized, another being, like in my head, so to speak, like a distinctly different personality, a distinctly different energetic pattern. And this was, if you'll recall from my first video, I was able to recognize the ancestors energetically, even though I didn't see their physical form. Well, this was one of those energetic forms, and it was in my space. I wasn't out of my body. It was in my body with me. And it was Albert Einstein. And I know that sounds crazy, but that's what it was. It was Albert Einstein. And there was no doubt about it. I didn't do anything to intend this. I didn't believe this was possible. I didn't try to conjure this up. I wasn't exploring anything. It's just boom, for whatever reason, there he was. And I was overjoyed. I was obvious recognition, and it was I wanted to give him a hug and say hello, and oh my gosh, this is amazing. And if anybody here that knows Albert Einstein's personality, he's kind of the nutty professor, very, just kind of kooky but brilliant, right? And he's like, Carl, we don't have much time. Go on an online IQ test right now and take an IQ test so that we can confirm the reality of what you're experiencing, because this is going to fade away like a dream and we need something to lock this in. And I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, brilliant, perfect. And I go over to the computer and I type in, you know, I Google or Yahoo at the time, whatever it was, online IQ tests, and there was a bunch of them, and I'm okay, here we go. And just type in your name and your birth date, and then right when it was time to like hit go, I was just completely gripped by this overwhelming paralysis of fear, and I just couldn't continue. And yet, like Albert's like sitting here. Imagine somebody sitting like right behind their heads above your shoulder, like we're both on the computer together, and he's like, "Carl, what are you doing?" And I'm just like, I can't do this. And I basically went into this huge paranoid conspiracy story where some government agency was going to, you know, hey, we got somebody over at this address in Anaheim, California, and they must be on drugs, and they're going to send the squad cars. And it was this huge conspiracy. It was to do with the church and politics and the Illuminati. I mean, it was scary, and there was just no way I could proceed. And Albert's like, Carl, please, you've got to do this. I can't stay here much longer. And I could feel this pressure needing to do that, but I was not able to do it. I just couldn't. It was literally like being gripped with fear, like being on the top of a high-rise building and just not being able to do it. And after a couple of minutes, he was gone. But no sooner was he gone that another being came into my awareness. And guess who it was? It was Timothy Leary. And for those of you who have watched anything about Timothy Leary's life or heard any of his interviews, he's quite a different personality than Einstein. He's brilliant as well, but he's Irish and he's a little bit of a smart-ass type of a guy. He's a kind of a rascally type of a guy. He's just totally different energy. And I immediately recognized Timothy in my space. Albert was gone. And so, I mean, before I could even say hi, Timothy Leary, it was as if he slapped me in the face. And I'm like, and he's like, Carl, don't be a pussy. Get on that fucking test right now and take it. We don't have much time. And it totally took me out of my fear. And so I took the IQ test. And, it's about a 20-minute test or whatever. And I just took it. But it was as if Leary was answering the questions. I know it's hard to explain, but I mean, I just took it, answering the questions, but Leary was there. Anyway, bottom line is I got 148 IQ. Okay? Now that's substantially higher than my normal IQ. And yes, I was in a manic period. Yes, people think I was bipolar or schizophrenic. And yes, I was doing drugs. And yes, I was irresponsible. And yes. And guess what else? Yes. 148 IQ. That's Timothy Leary's IQ. He was a Harvard professor. I have zero doubt that had I taken the test just a few minutes earlier, I would have scored 160. There's no doubt in my mind. And so this particular experience, whereas the first one showed me the reality, the greater reality of the non-physical reality, which I heretofore thought didn't exist, this experience on this day, 2 years later, showed me in no uncertain terms that there is application for this inner reality, for this non-physical reality. There is application. There is something worth exploring in these realms. The information can be brought through. I can bring through higher intelligence. And so that showed me in a crystal clear way, the reality of getting in touch with higher intelligence, genius intelligence. So, that's the second big experience that I wanted to talk about in my journey. And so now I fully understand that there is a non-physical reality, and I'm excited to explore it. And now I have actual application, and so there is value in going these places and exploring these realms, and that gives me even additional energy to invest my time and energy and money into these inner realms. And so I will leave that for now, and it's just about the 20-minute mark, which is about where I want to keep them. And so thank you for listening to me, and I will be putting out another one in about a week, and I would love it if you would subscribe, give me a thumbs up, and any comments would be appreciated as well. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll look forward to seeing you the next time. And by the way, I don't know how many of you noticed my shirt here, but imagination is more important than knowledge. And there's my good friend Albert Einstein. So, all right. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.